Hello, hello. I am Caum, as Murph mentioned. Megan, excuse me. I am a product manager at Puppet. I am new to the product management team, though. I have been at Puppet for almost 6.5 years. Before that, I was a systems administrator, living the dream. I still drink. And I joined Puppet because I was so involved in the Puppet community, and I really saw the effects that it had on my life as a system administrator. And so I was pretty excited to join the company. I started out as professional services and then went over into software engineering, then did some UX prototyping, went into marketing for a few years, and now I'm in product management. So it's been a fun ride. So today I want to talk to you about where we fit within the cloud and container space and what we see, the trends going on with our customers and what's going on in the industry and how we are addressing some of the problems that we are uniquely positioned to solve. We're living in the age of resource proliferation. All of you, I'm assuming, use Puppet. And you know that Puppet is great at declaring things in terms of resources. We're great at describing the things that make up your world in terms of resources, a discrete thing, an object that has properties, that has state that you can describe. But historically, we've always looked at the world through the world of the node, right? That's the lens. That's our focus. And even as cloud and containers, or particularly cloud, came available, we were able to translate that resource model for you to be able to manage your cloud resources with the Puppet language.
Spending too much time manually.
That's my cue. Man, I didn't think I was that bad. But still, you had to think of your cloud resources through the lens of a node. Well, the world doesn't look that way anymore. Right now, what we have is a collection of resources that live both in our cloud environments. Maybe you're using serverless, which has its own kind of resource to think about, all the way down into your hybrid infrastructure where you have your mainframe that sits in the corner and does a bunch of things and still makes a ton of money, but nobody wants to change it because everybody's afraid because nobody knows it's there. These are all things now that you have to be able to think about, right? From the top all the way down to the bottom. And when you add the addition of things like ephemerality, where a resource can exist for a few hours and then disappear, or maybe even a few seconds. Well, what does that world look like? What does your graph look like? What does that resource model look like in that kind of a world? We are growing very rapidly into this, right? We have this whole new world full of resources that we are growing extremely, extremely fast, and we need to be able to get a handle on it. One way to do that, I really like the OODA loop. The idea behind this is actually an old military process that came about where the idea was to have a process for rapidly observing, orienting, deciding, and then acting. When in the heat of battle, you need to be able to make good decisions very quickly. And this process was created to do that. When you're in IT, you often feel like you're at war. Right? You often feel like you're in battle. Things are going down. Things are crashing. You have to be able to make a good decision rapidly. And if you simplify it down, what you really need is the ability to do discovery of what's going on right now. Not what it was an hour ago. What's going on right now. Then you need to be able to have insights into it. Once you're able to observe all of this, what does it mean? And then you need to be able to act. And then you need to be able to understand how the world has changed as a result of your action. That's why we introduced Puppet Discovery. Puppet Discovery is a tool for discovering all of the distributed resources that you have across all of your environments. It's an agentless approach. Today, it scans AWS, EC2, containers, physical hosts. We're going to be discovering a lot more coming soon. We can instantly be able to bring any kind of resources, particularly compute resources that are not already under Puppet management, and install an agent on them and be able to bring them under management very quickly. But the great thing about Puppet Discovery is that it can understand all of the resources that you have and how they relate to each other. We can tell you what package you have installed where across containers, as well as VMs, as well as anything that you have running in Azure or GCP, or the mainframe even. It is delivered as a turnkey solution. You install this thing, and it's self-managing. If one of the services crashes, it restarts it automatically. And it's also auto-updating, which is a first for us. I'm sure many of you have gone through upgrading Puppet Enterprise. We have solved that problem with this product. So that's great. Now you know what's going on, but how do you manage it, right? How do you act? What do you do? What I've seen when I talk to customers is there's a couple of approaches. And the one that's most common is to create silos and understand the new technologies and new processes that can be developed, new ways of working within those silos. So you may spin up a greenfield team over here, and the devs may be like, we're going to use Docker. It's going to be awesome. We have Docker Compose. It's beautiful. And the ops team is like, wow, we need planet-sized scale. And so we're obviously going to need Kubernetes. So they're going to use that. And of course, we're going to do all of this on GKE or whatever else. And then you've got another organization that is adopted from Windows, and so they look at Azure, and they're really loving that, and the services that offers. And then you've got your traditional team that's still running on VMware. Well, this is great, but how do you get from the old world to the new world in that? So for example, I was just talking to a customer, I guess actually we first talked to them about 1.5 years ago. And they adopted a platform like this. It wasn't Kubernetes, but it was something like it. And they had built out this beautiful process. It was amazing. I mean, it was all event-driven. It was all container-based. They were going to be able to update things within minutes and distribute it across the globe. It was the way that they were going to work. I just spoke to them a few weeks ago. Not a single business application that actually makes them money is running on that platform yet. Because what they discovered is that while the technology is there, they didn't consider things like, how are they going to work with their security team? What does it look like to go through an audit of this platform? They didn't have answers for that, right? And so as they started to run into traditional operations problems within new technology, suddenly they hit a wall. They took the siloed approach instead of saying, look, let's start with the teams we have, and let's grow and evolve their technology and processes and skill set into where we want to be. It's a long game. You can't just build it and they will come. You have to be able to bring everyone along equally in the journey, or you just wind up with useless silos. With Puppet, what we're trying to do to help with this is provide a common language across all of the technologies you manage. You're already probably using Puppet to manage your servers, virtual machines, things like that. We want to make it even easier for you to be able to manage the cloud infrastructure resources. And not just compute, not just the VMs that you're spinning up. We want to be able to make it easier for you to manage VPCs and security groups. We want you to be able to audit it, improve what you have at exactly any moment, and prove how it was 3 hours ago when your ephemeral, one of your ephemeral systems may have gone down and come back up, who knows. We want to make it easier for you to be able to lay down platforms on top of that and then lay down distributed container applications on top of that, all with a single common language. And there's a huge benefit to that. Again, going back to the customer that I was just talking about, they had adopted entirely new, different technologies that required different specializations. Right? So they had one admin who was very specialized in the platform piece. They had another admin that was very specialized in the provisioning piece. And they had another one that was very specialized in the CI and CD delivery piece. Well, if any of those admins left, suddenly they weren't really sure how to take over. Right? They had different languages, different technologies, different handoff points. Well, if they had one tool that was going to provide them a common language, that they could say, look, I don't know how to manage this technology, but I know how to read the language that describes it. I can pull up the infrastructure code, and I can at least read that. And now we at least are all speaking the exact same language, and I can propose changes, and somebody else can consume those changes and improve them and move on with them. As an example of that, here is a demo application that I wrote a few years ago. And what I've done here is I've provided an abstraction. It says, look, what I really want is a web component, an infrastructure component for this web service that we have. And what I've done is I said, look, where do you want this thing to live? Do you want it to be on, we're going to default to AWS. But underneath the hood, I can say, OK, well, if you're telling me it needs to be on VMware, well, I know what a VMware VM looks like in the context of VMware. And I know what an AWS VM looks like in the context of AWS. But you don't have to worry about that. What you worry about is the abstraction. You tell me what you want, and I can hide and abstract the details away so that you don't have to worry about them. Now we all get one common language, one set of parameters, one set of properties that we can think through and talk about. And even better, if we need to change the implementation of the infrastructure underneath it, who cares? The model is still the same. The language is still the same. Another customer story. A customer decided to start with AWS. Got it up and running within weeks. They were very happy with it. And then suddenly they had to put it into production. Well, turns out they didn't have processes around that. I spoke with another customer. And they took their existing Puppet investments that they made, and they were able to get their production applications running in AWS within a few weeks, because they were able to just change the things within Puppet on the underlying implementation that was different for the new platform that they were moving to. And they had all of that already modeled. They already were able to use their same security processes, their same review processes, their same audit processes. Everything was the same. They just were able to change out the underlying details, right? And so this is actually a quote from that customer where it says, look, if you're not starting with automation, you're just doing the same thing on somebody else's computers. Like, don't do that. This was actually the exact same customer. I really like this customer, by the way. I wish I could use their name. A very, 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 very large bank. They had a problem with some of their developers spinning up EC2 instances and not telling anybody. And they would just have a dev instance, which is fine, but they wouldn't shut it down. So like, it would live for weeks before somebody caught it. Well, so what they did is said, look, all right, what we're going to do is say, if you want a VM, all you have to do is pull it in a pull request. If you want a stack, just put in a pull request. We'll merge it. And in fact, they even made it even simpler so that you could update a YAML file, and then Puppet would pull that in automatically. So they wouldn't even have to go through an approval process necessarily. But what would happen is they set this purge true that says if there's ever an EC2 instance that Puppet does not know about, kill it. Just get rid of it. We know it's not supposed to be there because it didn't go through the process. So clearly, it should not exist. Just kill it. To be fair, they're the only customer I've worked with that actually does this. But I thought it was pretty cool. Speaking of continuous delivery, like that process that they need to go through, Puppet needs to be very simple for you to be to consume and throw up a stack of resources very quickly. This is an example of a Groovy script that uses a Docker image that contains all of the Puppet modules that you need inside of it. And then you run a process inside of that that applies a piece of Puppet code that will then spin up and provision very rapidly all of the EC2 resources you need. And this, actually, the script in here will pull up VPCs, set up subnets, set up security groups, internet gateways, all of it, all in one stack. And you just have to run this within your continuous delivery pipeline. There you go. Now you've got your stack up and running. But you've got it in a way that is repeatable. You've got it in a way that uses the same language you're using for all of your other infrastructure. So this is the fun part. This is every conversation around cloud and containers and Puppet always comes down to this. What does configuration mean in a world of containers? And the reality is that configuration management just has a different role. Historically, configuration management is, to go back to the military, is actually a military process of identification, control, status accounting, verification, and audit. A lot of people think that configuration management is all about managing packages and files and services. It's not. It's just when configuration management was applied to IT, to modern IT, that's the problem that was at hand. That's the problem that it was good at solving. So that's what it did. That's the problem that we solved. But configuration management is about these processes. And the translation layer needs to be able to be, there needs to be a translation layer to describing the new configurations that you have. You still have configurations. They're just moved to a higher order. You're not messing around with the files and the packages as much anymore. Now you're messing around with the replication controllers, right? You're messing around with the service endpoints. Those are the things that matter now. You still have configurations to audit. Actually, you have a lot more, right? There's a lot more that you need to be able to identify, control, and verify. So what have we delivered to help you with all of this? We have updated our Azure module with better networking and storage support so that you can have the exact same language I was talking about earlier for you to be able to manage your AWS resources, your Azure resources, GCP resources, vSphere resources, all with one language and one abstraction. Make your model, apply it anywhere. Our new GCP modules, same thing, hugely updated. This is a massive, massive new release. We worked with Google for a long, long time on this. You can now manage not just compute and storage, but you can manage GCE. You can manage SQL with their new SQL service, not new, but their SQL service. Google DNS. Now your model can be far, far more complete. And what I love about this solution is that it's actually auto-generated. Google did an amazing job of being able to take their API specs and then automatically pull it out and put it through a code generator that outputs Puppet modules. So now you're always up to date, right? It's awesome. Now no more artisanal modules. So when it comes to adopting containers and distributed microservices, this is a conversation that varies very, very differently across all of the different customers that I have. And some patterns have definitely started to form. The first one is don't solve tomorrow's problems today. I was actually just yesterday talking to someone who was really struggling to adopt Kubernetes and really get it into their way of working. And as we continued to talk, what we realized is they didn't need Kubernetes yet. They need it eventually, without question. Like eventually, that's where they want to get. But that wasn't their problem today. Their problem today was figuring out how to work with just containers. Like just figuring out how to work with Docker, right? That was the problem that they were starting with. And I think that that's a problem that a lot of, especially larger IT organizations have a longer history. That seems to be the thing that they're really struggling with, is they want to adopt everything. They know where they want to get. And it's hard, it's easy to lose focus of the problem that you have right now at hand, which is right now we need to be more agile. Right now we need to be more portable, whatever that may be, right? That varies with your business. So do you really need scheduling? I mean, do you really need scheduling right now? Like, is that the actual problem that you have right now when adopting containers and microservices? Do you need planet scale monitoring of microservices that you haven't even built out yet? The answer has been no when you really dig into it. But it's easy to forget that and look at this and say, I don't know where to start, so I better start with it all. I loved this, this pic that went around the internet, I don't know, about a year ago. Because it's true. I've talked to so many customers that they deploy out, actually the one I was talking about earlier, they deployed out Kubernetes or a container platform, and it was nice and beautiful, and there was nothing to run on it. Not really. Like, they spent a bunch of money and got no value out of it. Don't do that. So where do you start? OK, so like we've talked about what not to do. What do you do? Well, if you've made your investment in Puppet, right, if you started here, or if you're looking into it, this is how you can get deployed, Docker deployed into production. And our customers do this. Just simply use our Docker module, and we'll get it deployed everywhere in a consistent, repeatable way. Once you have that, build your abstraction. I have a service. It has some configurations. Underneath the hood, I'm going to install Docker. I'm going to make sure that my image is there, and I'm going to make sure my application service is running. That's an easy next step. Now, this isn't the final step. This isn't where you want to be eventually. But this is an easy next step. This is the thing that you can take your existing applications and learn how to containerize it, build processes around it, build understanding, understand how to get it through security processes, audit controls, and get it running in production. Now, really start learning. So what have we delivered to help you do that? We've got an updated Docker module. It deprecates the old Docker platform module. This version of the module works with Code Manager. Yay! It can manage not only the Docker installation and configuration, it can handle the syncing of Docker images, as I was just showing, run applications. It actually can create a systemd service that will just automatically restart the container if something happens bad happens with it. You can manage Docker networks. You can use Docker Compose to spin up multiple container applications. But the new bits in the module are the swarm services and swarm secrets. So now, when you're ready to start thinking about how you're going to handle distribution and scheduling, you can start adopting Docker's swarm services on day 1 or day 2. First, you do the thing I was just showing you. Then you enable this. But again, you have that easy path of evolution. Take one step at a time. Each time, being able to use Puppet to swap out the underlying implementation and get to that next step. So how many people here are running Kubernetes? Good. It's a good number of hands. Actually, let's ask this. How many people are using containers in production today? All right, great. So how many people are using Docker Swarm? OK, awesome. So Kubernetes is a beast. We all know this. I remember the first time I tried to deploy Kubernetes just to toy around with it, it took me over a week. It can be quite a beast to deploy. What you need in order to manage Kubernetes at any kind of reasonable scale and any kind of thing that looks like production is you need a single source of truth for that deployment configuration. You need the ability to change security configurations on a dime. You need to be able to manage the certificates that are going through all of the different agents. And you need to be able to test out those changes before pushing them into production. Right? That one seems obvious. With our new Kubernetes module, you can now just do this. This is huge. Again, it took me a week to deploy Kubernetes for the first time, and that's not uncommon. I've talked to a lot of customers that have had the exact same experience with it. I can deploy Kubernetes now in under 15 minutes. And it's done right, out of the box. If I need to deploy a worker, done. Build your abstraction. Give it the role you need, assign it to the nodes you need, and you're done. We have delivered the new Kubernetes module that allows you to deploy Kubernetes in an HA controllers, auto-provision the workers and the agents to be able to get them joined and scale your cluster out horizontally. You can manage the certificates across the cluster so that you can change the configuration, the security configuration on a dime. And we think that already, I've already talked to a lot of customers today about this that are just super excited about it, because now they can get their hands around Kubernetes when they're ready for it very, very rapidly. And again, once you're ready for that step, that next step, evolutionary step, it becomes very simple with Puppet, because you've already got your model. Now you just have to swap out your underlying implementation. And very quickly, I want to touch on container application deployments. How many of you are using Helm? All right, 2 people, great. We can help you there. So Helm is a service that is it's basically apt-get for Kubernetes, or Docker Compose for Kubernetes is a more accurate example. We can help with the and not only the installation of Helm itself and deployment of the Helm service on top of Kubernetes, we can help you deploy Helm charts. One of the things that, again, is important is to have a shared common language. And with Puppet, we can start to manage the infrastructure applications and even business applications that are managed with a Helm chart on Kubernetes in an auditable change process that is peer-reviewed and can be changed at any moment and understood by anyone. The Helm module, I already talked about that. It helps you do that. You can deploy the service as well as the charts. I'm going to switch over to a demo, but first, I want to do a pitch for Scott Colton's talk. So Scott is the tech lead on the container, cloud and containers team. And after this, in track 1, he's giving a talk on Zero to Kubernetes. It's going to go in very, very deep technical depth about the challenges that I've talked about today. So he's going to really show you how you can get up and going with Kubernetes and Puppet. All right. So here we have a Kubernetes cluster. We've got a single controller, 2 simple agents, nothing too special. This is deployed with Puppet, again, in 15 minutes. We were able to spin it up, be done. What we want to do now is expand the cluster. We need it to be bigger, get some new instances out there, and join it to the cluster. How we're going to do that is I have this Kubernetes worker class within Puppet Enterprise. And what you can see down here is I have this pp_role. And any node that has Kubernetes worker value will automatically be added into this group. And you can see we've pinned those other 2 ones here, so they're just automatically there. And anything that gets added to this group will get this role Kubernetes worker class assigned to it. I already showed you this code. This is the code that within 10 lines deployed Kubernetes. And here's the code we're going to use to provision. What this is a manifest that will spin up any number of EC2 instances in a repeatable standard way. Now, because this is code, I can abstract this as much as I want. All of this configuration data, this can come from Hira, it can come from data bindings. It doesn't really matter. For simplicity, I put it here. And I've set a resource, a default, to be able to say, these are the things you use, and if you have any number of EC2 instances, you don't have to repeat all this information. As part of the user data of spinning up EC2 instances, I'm going to have a script that uses our frictionless agent installer to lay down trusted facts as well as install the Puppet agent, join it to the Puppet master, and then from there, hopefully, it will add it to the group, and you can deploy the workers. All right, so let's actually do this. Puppet apply AWS kube workers. All right, so it already looked at the EC2 API and said, OK, well, you've told me, and if you looked at the code, there was a default of 4 if I didn't give it another variable. And it said, well, all right, I saw 1 and 2, but 3 and 4 aren't there. We need to create it. So it changed it from absent to running. Now we've just provisioned new AWS instances in EC2. And if we come back here and refresh, all right, great. So we've got 3 and 4 up and running. And if I go back here, actually, I'm just going to let it spin for a minute. This takes a little bit. So what just happened is we ran our installer script. It's going to take a minute to register. But once it's done, it's going to lay down that trusted fact on the system, on the EC2 resource, and say, this is how we can use the rules, the policy rules within the classifier to be able to say, this is supposed to be a Kubernetes worker. And it's probably there by now. There we go. So node 3 and 4, now in this group, gets the class. And I don't think this will be here yet. We'll see. All right, there they are. So we just went from absolutely nothing to applying a manifest, realizing that our cloud resources were not in our desired state. We spun up 2 new instances to bring it into the desired state, laid down a Puppet agent that automatically classified it with the Puppet master, automatically pulled in our Kubernetes Puppet code, laid down Kubernetes agents, joined it to the cluster, and we just scaled it out. Done. And all of this can be done through a CI. It can be done manually, however you like. One last thing that I want to show you is Cream. Cream stands for Kubernetes rules everything around me. Because why does it not? This is developed by Scott Colton, and it allows you to very rapidly spin up Kubernetes on your local machine using the Puppet code to deploy the Kubernetes cluster. Now, why is that better than something like Minikube? Because this is the same as what you'll be running in production. It's using the same Puppet code that you'll be using it to run Kubernetes in production. Now, you can use this to spin up something locally, test out your Puppet code very rapidly. When you're happy with it, push that code out to production, and now you've got it. You've updated your production Kubernetes cluster. It uses Vagrant on your behind the scenes on your local machine, but we also have a CloudFormation template. In fact, the demo I just showed you was spun up in AWS originally from this CloudFormation template. And then I expanded the cluster very rapidly, as you saw. All right, it looks like we got 15 minutes. So I am done with my piece, and I'd like to open up to questions. If you do have questions, if you can, go over to the mic in the middle. I know that's asking a lot, but I want to make sure that everything's on the recording. If you can't, I'll repeat the question.
Yeah, so by the way, this is amazing. And so the one question I asked is, I was thinking about the area where you had microservices. And then you talked about Docker and Kubernetes and scheduling, and they didn't have even Docker. So that made sense, but going from, like, say, a monolithic to microservices is a big, huge jump. And so I'm thinking, you know, reverse proxy, load balancing, membership relationships, which Puppet, for the longest time, never did a good job of that. Externalized resources and static, indirect configurations have never worked. So I'm just kind of curious about that missing piece, because there's still, even if you don't go to Kubernetes and wire this up, there's still like service discovery and the other part of it getting there, and with Puppet in it as, you know, that missing, that's like as the gap.
Yeah. That's a very good point. I'm reminded of this talk from Adrian Cockcroft. That he did this talk at the Puppet office about how to adopt microservices. And one of the things that he talked about is don't do a rewrite of your app, right? Like that just takes forever, and you end up not having any value in the end because the app will not be the same app that you'll need when you're done. Instead, what he would suggest is setting up, you know, your reverse proxy, as you mentioned, and then one at a time piecing out the microservices into a container and then getting that running. And how our strategy with Puppet in terms of like service discovery has always been to install service discovery tools to help you do that, Console being the prime example. How Puppet helps you, how at least I've seen Puppet help people adopt microservices, is by taking the model that they have to deploy it and being able to separate out into a different piece and say, now we're going to create a service that is going to be this microservice, and underneath that, we're going to describe the container that we're going to pull in, deploy the container on a single host, just as kind of like the code that I was showing you earlier, and making that process really simple and auditable. But yeah, I think like that's the thing that we're really focused on right now, is making that piece easy for you to be able to take a single small piece of a monolithic app and then break one out at a time and then apply a model on top of that so that you can actually manage it over time.
It's another practical question. One of the service discoveries that's popular out there is Console.
Yep.
And so I saw in a lot of integration stuff, seems like everyone and their brother's doing a higher ed Console liaison. And I would be interested, like you mentioned, source of truth. I love it as a source of truth, but what's the recommended like Console out there where it can be used to integrate it? There's a bunch of them, I don't know which one works or not works.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a great answer for you. I know that there's some interesting work around taking console output and dynamically updating things like higher data, kind of like I mentioned, but I don't really know a lot of the details around that. I'd like to talk to you afterwards and kind of see what your problems you're running into and see if we can help you out there. Cool. Yes.
Hi. I was wondering if you had run into any challenges using the new Kubernetes module with ingress controllers and the GCE ingress controller versus using your own or using Nginx.
I have, and I don't have a good answer for you right now. Yeah, that's, again, I would love to talk to you after and kind of see what your problems are. And actually, at that level, I would talk to Scott Colton. He's the one that can really help you on that level. Yeah, but you know Scott, correct? I believe you do? Yeah.
I'll be there at the 3:15.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Can the Docker module, the new one, initialize a new swarm manager and workers too?
Yes.
Okay. And just wondering, what's the difference between Kubernetes and Docker Swarm that so many people seem to be choosing it?
Seem to be choosing Docker Swarm?
No, or Kubernetes.
Kubernetes? Kubernetes scales a lot farther. Not that Swarm does not scale. It actually scales fairly well to a little over 1,000 systems is, I think, the highest test that they've done. But Kubernetes is much more managed to desired state, has much more like RBAC controls in it now. It's far more scalable. Whereas Swarm is very, very easy to get started with. It's very, very easy, but it doesn't have quite the level of controls that Kubernetes has.
Also had a Docker Swarm question. That's really cool that it can create a Docker Swarm on the fly like that. We've had to resort to writing scripts ourselves and using service discovery tool. We use etcd to do it. I just wanted to see if you could shed some light on what's going on behind the scenes in that module that's actually creating the Docker Swarm.
Mm-hmm. I wish I could. I'm sorry. I'm the product guy. No, so unfortunately, I don't know the under the hood pieces of it. But I know that it's using Hiera in order to manage the certificate layer. But I don't. I think it's just activating the Swarm service on a subset of the clusters and then having them all point to a central controller, which gets the consensus. But no, I'm afraid I don't understand that.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry.
Have you run into any difficulties taking things that you've done in Cream and then applying them to your production Kubernetes clusters?
I don't have a Kubernetes production cluster.
Or Dev.
So, but yeah, so I have a couple of customers who are interested in using that, in doing that. And I don't think, Cream was just released yesterday, and the intersection of people who have used Cream in the past, i.e. me and Scott and the team, don't have production Kubernetes clusters that we actually run real business apps on. So I can't really speak intelligently about that yet. It's not a problem that we've run into, but I can say that when we have a Kubernetes cluster that we've managed with Puppet, and we have been able to spin up things within Cream, apply Puppet updates, and then apply those to the production system as well. We haven't run into any problems with that.
I look forward to experimenting with it.
Cool. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm Carl@puppet.com and then @CAUM on Twitter. I'd love to hear about your experiences with any of these things that we've delivered. Conversations are how we prioritize things and make things better. So any feedback you have would be much appreciated. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.